My sister mocked my job, then learned I own her $50 million company. The day started like any other, with the familiar hum of my laptop and the soft glow of early morning sunlight streaming through the blinds. Sitting at my desk in a modest corner office on the 12th floor of our building, I couldn't help but smile as I reviewed the quarterly financial reports. The numbers were staggering: revenue streams that had tripled in just 2 years, partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, and an employee roster that now exceeded 300 talented individuals. Yet, despite the success that surrounded me, there was always that nagging voice from my past, echoing through the corridors of my mind. It was during one of those quiet moments, while sipping my second cup of coffee, that my phone buzzed with a text notification. The message was from my sister, "Claire, another day of fetching coffee for the boss? How's the corporate ladder treating you?" The words stung more than they should have, considering how far I'd come. But then again, Claire had always been this way, quick to judge, quicker to mock, and seemingly blind to anything beyond her own perception of success. I remembered vividly the first time she had dismissed my career choice. We were sitting in her perfectly curated living room, where every piece of furniture seemed to whisper privilege and entitlement. "You're still working for that tech startup?" she had asked, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer coffee mug. "Isn't that just glorified secretarial work? Why not do something meaningful, like teaching or social work?" What she didn't understand, what she refused to see, was that I wasn't just working for anyone. At 24, when most of my peers were still figuring out their next steps, I had become part of something revolutionary. Our company wasn't simply developing software, we were creating solutions that changed how businesses operated globally. And I wasn't just another cog in the machine, I was one of its architects, having risen from an entry-level position to vice president of operations in just 6 years. But Claire saw none of that. To her, I was still the little sister who needed guidance, whose choices required constant validation from someone who had never walked a day in my shoes. She lived in a world of inherited wealth and societal expectations, where success was measured by the right connections and prestigious degrees. My path, forged through sleepless nights, countless sacrifices, and unwavering determination, didn't fit into her neatly defined boxes of achievement. As I stared at her latest text, memories flooded back of family gatherings where she would subtly undermine my accomplishments. The way she would roll her eyes when I mentioned upcoming projects, or how she would steer conversations toward her volunteer work at the country club, as if serving canapés at charity events somehow carried more weight than leading a team of brilliant engineers. Each interaction chipped away at my confidence, making me question whether I was truly worthy of the success I had achieved. Yet, beneath the surface of these interactions lay something deeper, more complex than mere sibling rivalry. It was the pain of being misunderstood by someone who was supposed to know you best. The frustration of watching your achievements dismissed because they didn't conform to someone else's narrow definition of success. And perhaps most painfully, the realization that no matter how high you climbed, some people would always insist on looking down at you. Despite the hurt her words caused, I couldn't entirely blame Claire for her perspective. She had grown up believing in a certain narrative about success, one that had been carefully curated by generations of privilege and expectation. In her world, worth was often measured by appearances rather than substance, by titles rather than impact. The irony was that while she spent her days maintaining the facade of perfection, I was quietly building something real, something transformative. As I set my phone aside and returned to reviewing the financial reports, I felt a familiar resolve strengthening within me. This wasn't about proving anything to Claire or anyone else. It was about staying true to the vision that had driven me since the beginning, the belief that technology could be a force for positive change, that hard work and dedication could break through even the most rigid barriers. And maybe, just maybe, someday she would see that success isn't defined by how it looks from the outside, but by the difference it makes from within. The journey hadn't been easy, and the scars of doubt planted by Claire's constant criticism ran deep. There were nights when I questioned everything, my abilities, my choices, my very worthiness to sit at the table with industry leaders. During those dark hours, her mocking words would echo loudest, amplifying every insecurity. "Is this really what you want to be doing with your life?" she had asked once, her tone dripping with condescension. "Running errands for executives who probably don't even know your name?" What she failed to understand was the intricate dance of power dynamics that played out daily in our corporate world. When I first joined the company, I was indeed the youngest member of the team, often tasked with responsibilities that seemed menial. But each task, no matter how small, was an opportunity to learn, to observe, to understand the inner workings of a successful enterprise. While others might have seen fetching coffee as servitude, I saw it as access to boardroom conversations, strategic discussions, and the decision-making processes of seasoned professionals. The turning point came during a crisis that nearly sank the company. Our flagship product had encountered a critical flaw just weeks before a major launch, threatening millions in potential revenue and the jobs of dozens of employees. While senior executives scrambled to find solutions, I worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating between development teams, customer support, and marketing departments. For 72 hours straight, I barely left my desk, fueled by adrenaline and a determination to save what we had built. When the dust settled and the product launched successfully, it was my comprehensive understanding of both technical and operational aspects that caught the CEO's attention. He called me into his office one evening, not to discuss performance metrics or quarterly goals, but to talk about leadership. "You've shown something remarkable," he had said, his eyes searching mine. "Not just competence, but character. The ability to see the big picture while managing the smallest details." That conversation marked the beginning of my rapid ascent through the ranks. Within months, I was promoted to project manager, then department head, and eventually to vice president of operations. Each promotion brought new challenges, new doubters, and inevitably, new criticisms from Claire. "Must be nice to ride the coattails of success," she would say, oblivious to the fact that I was helping design those very coattails. Her words became a strange sort of fuel, driving me to prove not just to her, but to myself, that my achievements were legitimate, earned through blood, sweat, and countless late nights. The hardest part wasn't the external validation or lack thereof, it was learning to silence the internalized version of Claire's voice that sometimes crept into my thoughts. During crucial presentations or high-stakes negotiations, I could feel her skepticism lurking in the corners of my mind. "Are you sure you belong here?" it would whisper. "These people are so much more qualified than you." The answer, I learned, wasn't to ignore these doubts but to acknowledge them, to recognize them as relics of old wounds that no longer held power over me. As I rose through the ranks, I found myself mentoring young professionals, many of whom reminded me of my younger self, eager, ambitious, but often plagued by self-doubt. Through them, I began to understand the cyclical nature of imposter syndrome, how it could manifest differently based on background, gender, and personal history. I made it a point to create spaces where vulnerability was strength, where questions were encouraged, and where growth was celebrated over perfection. The company culture evolved alongside my journey, transforming from a traditional hierarchical structure to a more inclusive, collaborative environment. We implemented mentorship programs, diversity initiatives, and professional development tracks that prioritized substance over appearance. These changes weren't just good for business, they were essential for creating a workplace where everyone, regardless of their background or the voices of doubt in their heads, could thrive. Through it all, Claire remained blissfully unaware of the empire I was helping build. Her occasional texts and comments continued to arrive like clockwork, each one a reminder of how far I'd come and how little she understood about my world. But instead of resentment, I found myself feeling something closer to pity, not for her inability to see my success, but for the limitations she imposed on herself through her rigid definitions of achievement. The irony wasn't lost on me that while she busied herself with maintaining appearances and social standing, I was quietly reshaping industries, creating jobs, and building a legacy that would long outlast any country club membership. Yet, rather than dwell on this disparity, I chose to focus on the future, on expanding our reach, innovating our products, and continuing to challenge perceptions about what success truly meant. Every board meeting, every strategic decision, every handshake with a new partner served as a testament to the power of perseverance and vision. The company's valuation soared past the $50 million mark, though I never made a big deal about it. Success, I had learned, wasn't about the numbers or the headlines, it was about the lives touched, the barriers broken, and the proof that sometimes, the most profound victories are the ones that happen when no one is watching. As I prepared for our annual shareholder meeting, I reflected on how different this world of calculated risks and groundbreaking innovations was from Claire's realm of polished surfaces and predetermined paths. Here, success wasn't handed down, it was earned through grit, intelligence, and the courage to redefine what was possible. And while she continued to measure worth through the lens of societal expectations, I was busy building something that would redefine value itself. The morning of the shareholder meeting dawned bright and clear, promising one of those perfect spring days that seemed to hold infinite possibilities. As I stepped into the conference room of our sleek downtown headquarters, I couldn't help but notice the transformation that had taken place over the years. What had once been a modest gathering of hopeful entrepreneurs and cautious investors had evolved into a prestigious event attended by industry leaders, venture capitalists, and media representatives from across the globe. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as attendees mingled, exchanging business cards and discussing the latest technological breakthroughs. From my position near the front of the room, I observed the subtle dynamics at play, the established players sizing up newcomers, the young innovators brimming with ideas yet to be heard, and the seasoned veterans exchanging knowing glances about market trends. It struck me how much this scene mirrored my own journey, a microcosm of the corporate world where every interaction carried layers of meaning and potential. Our CEO took the stage precisely at 9 o'clock, his presence commanding immediate attention. As he began outlining the company's achievements and future projections, I noticed several familiar faces in the audience, partners we had worked with for years, competitors who had become collaborators, and journalists whose coverage had helped propel our growth. Their expressions ranged from impressed to intrigued, reflecting the respect we had earned through consistent innovation and strategic execution. Then came the moment I had been preparing for all week, the announcement of our latest partnership with a major international corporation. As I approached the podium to present the details, I felt a surge of pride mixed with nostalgia. Just 5 years ago, I had sat in similar meetings, taking notes and observing from the shadows. Now I stood center stage, representing a company whose valuation had recently surpassed the $50 million mark, a milestone that seemed almost surreal given our humble beginnings. The presentation went smoothly, each slide building upon the last to paint a picture of unprecedented opportunity and mutual benefit. As I wrapped up my remarks and fielded questions from the audience, I noticed something unusual in the back row. A figure stood out among the sea of suits and business attire, someone I hadn't expected to see here. Claire. She looked different from her usual polished self, her designer dress slightly rumpled, her hair less perfectly styled than normal. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between shock and disbelief. After the formal presentations concluded, I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands and answering questions. With each interaction, I could feel Claire's eyes following me, her presence becoming increasingly conspicuous. Finally, as the room began to empty, she approached me, her usual confident stride replaced by hesitant steps. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice lacking its characteristic edge. We moved to a quieter corner of the conference room, where the remnants of our meeting lingered in half-empty coffee cups and scattered papers. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a chair, her composure noticeably shaken. I need to understand something," she began, her words coming out in a rush. "All these people, this entire operation, it's yours, isn't it? You're not just working here, you're running this place." Her admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I nodded slowly, watching as the reality of my position began to sink in. "For the past 3 years, I've been one of the principal shareholders," I explained, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. "We've expanded into 12 countries, developed technologies that are changing industry standards, and created hundreds of jobs along the way." Claire's face paled as she processed this information. But how? When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me?" Her questions tumbled out, each one revealing a crack in the facade of certainty she had maintained for so long. I watched as her perfect world of predefined success began to unravel, confronted with the raw power of achievement that couldn't be measured by social status or superficial markers. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either of us. For years, she had dismissed my career as insignificant, while I had quietly built an empire that now commanded global attention. Yet, as I looked at her struggling to reconcile her preconceptions with reality, I felt not triumph, but a deep sense of compassion. This moment wasn't about victory over my sister, it was about understanding how our different paths had led us to this confrontation. "I wanted to tell you," I admitted softly. "But I realized that explanations wouldn't have mattered until you were ready to see beyond the surface. Until you could understand that success isn't about titles or appearances, it's about impact, about creating something meaningful that stands on its own merits." As I spoke, I could see the walls of her constructed reality beginning to crumble, brick by painful brick. The revelation had shattered something fundamental in Claire's worldview. She sat there, her perfectly manicured hands trembling as she processed the magnitude of what I had built. "All this time," she whispered, more to herself than to me, I thought I knew." Her voice trailed off, unable to complete the sentence that would acknowledge how wrong she had been. I watched as the carefully constructed facade she had maintained for years began to crack. The woman who had prided herself on understanding the nuances of high society, who had judged others based on their perceived station in life, was now confronting the reality that true success existed on a completely different plane. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the sophisticated technology displays, the serious-faced executives deep in conversation, the journalists furiously typing on their laptops. Each element of the scene seemed to reinforce the gap between her assumptions and reality. "You must think I'm ridiculous," she finally managed, her voice barely audible above the diminishing hum of post-meeting conversations. "All those things I said, the way I treated your career like..." She paused, searching for words that could adequately convey her remorse. Like it was something to be mocked instead of admired. What struck me most was the genuine confusion in her expression, as if she were seeing me for the first time. The sister who had always seemed so sure of herself, so certain about the rules of success and failure, now appeared lost in a world she didn't fully understand. "It's not about what I think," I responded gently. "It's about recognizing that worth isn't determined by external validation or societal expectations. Everything you believed about success, about what matters in life, has been challenged today." As she absorbed this truth, I saw flickers of recognition in her eyes. The same drive that had pushed her to maintain her perfect image was now redirecting itself, forcing her to confront uncomfortable realities about her own choices and values. "I built this company on principles that go beyond profit margins," I continued. "We've created opportunities for people who were told they didn't belong in tech. We've developed solutions that make businesses more efficient and sustainable. And through it all, I've learned that true fulfillment comes from making a difference, not from checking boxes on someone else's list of accomplishments." Claire's breathing grew shallow, her chest rising and falling with the weight of these revelations. "You've been carrying this whole world on your shoulders," she murmured, "while I've been playing dress-up." The admission seemed to physically pain her, each word forcing her to acknowledge the shallowness of her previous pursuits. All those charity events, the country club memberships, the networking parties, they were just distractions. Ways to fill time while pretending to be something meaningful. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, that she had spent years dismissing my career while I had been quietly revolutionizing an industry. But as I watched her struggle with this newfound understanding, I realized that her journey toward enlightenment had only just begun. The foundations of her identity, built on generations of privilege and expectation, were crumbling before our eyes. Yet, in that moment of vulnerability, I saw something unexpected. The possibility of redemption, of growth, of a sister rediscovering what truly mattered in life. The air between us thickened with unspoken truths as Claire struggled to process the magnitude of her misjudgment. "I don't even know where to begin," she confessed, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. "Everything I thought I knew about success, about what it means to achieve something worthwhile, it's all wrong, isn't it?" Her eyes searched mine for confirmation, seeking guidance through the chaos of her unraveling beliefs. I reached out, placing my hand over hers in a gesture that felt both foreign and natural. "It's not about being wrong," I explained softly. "It's about realizing that there are different kinds of success, different ways to measure impact and fulfillment. The life you've built isn't invalid, it just needs to evolve, to find deeper meaning beyond appearances and expectations." As I spoke, I could see her processing these words, each one a seed planted in the fertile ground of her awakening consciousness. Claire's gaze drifted to the bustling activity around us, employees collaborating on innovative projects, investors discussing future possibilities, and young professionals absorbing knowledge from experienced mentors. "This," she gestured vaguely at the scene, "is real. These people aren't here for show or status. They're building something that actually matters." Her voice carried a mixture of awe and shame, the dawning realization of what true achievement looked like. The transformation happening before my eyes was both heartbreaking and beautiful. The sister who had once dismissed my career as insignificant was now confronting the emptiness of her own pursuits. "All those years," she whispered, "I thought I was helping people through my volunteer work, making a difference through social events. But I was just existing, floating on the surface while you were diving deep, creating waves that actually changed things." Tears welled in her eyes as she acknowledged the depth of her misunderstanding. What touched me most was the authenticity of her revelation. This wasn't just about recognizing my success, it was about fundamentally redefining her understanding of purpose and achievement. I used to think success was about being seen in the right places, knowing the right people, she continued, her words tumbling out faster now. But watching you lead this company, seeing how you've transformed an industry while empowering others, it's humbling. It makes me realize how much I've wasted chasing approval instead of creating actual value. As she spoke, I recognized the seeds of change taking root within her. The same determination that had driven her to maintain appearances could now be redirected toward meaningful pursuits. You've built something extraordinary here, she admitted, her voice steadying as a new resolve began to emerge. Something that will outlast trends and fads, that creates lasting impact. And I want to understand how you did it. Not just the business side, but how you maintained your integrity, your vision, while facing doubt and criticism. The moment stretched between us, filled with the promise of new beginnings. Claire's posture straightened slightly, her shoulders squaring as if preparing for a different kind of challenge. Maybe, she ventured cautiously, there's still time to find my own path. To stop trying to fit into someone else's mold of success and start creating something that actually matters. Her eyes met mine with a mixture of hope and trepidation, the first tentative steps toward a journey of self-discovery. In that instant, I saw not just my sister, but a fellow traveler on the road to authentic achievement. The woman who had once mocked my job was now standing at the threshold of genuine understanding, ready to embrace a world where success was measured by impact rather than appearances, where fulfillment came from creating rather than consuming. And as I looked at her, I knew that this moment marked not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of something far more profound, a shared journey toward discovering what truly matters in life. The moment stretched between us, filled with unspoken potential. Claire's fingers traced the edge of the conference table, her movements slow and deliberate, as if grounding herself in this new reality. "What do you think I should do now?" she asked, her voice tinged with vulnerability but also a spark of determination I hadn't seen before. It was as though the weight of her misjudgments had cleared space for something raw and genuine to emerge. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. This wasn't about giving her a roadmap, it was about helping her find her own path. "Start by asking yourself what truly matters to you," I said. "Not what society expects or what looks good on paper, but what makes your heart race with purpose. Then take one step toward that every single day, no matter how small." She nodded, her expression shifting from overwhelmed to contemplative. "You make it sound so simple," she murmured, though there was no bitterness in her tone, just curiosity. "But I know it's not. You've worked harder than anyone I know, sacrificed things I can't even imagine. And here I am, trying to figure out where to begin." "You don't have to start from scratch," I replied gently. "You already have skills, connections, and experiences that could be channeled into something meaningful. Maybe it's time to look at those through a different lens. Ask yourself, how can I use what I have to create value? To help others? To leave the world better than I found it?" Claire leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting toward the large windows overlooking the city skyline. For once, she wasn't focused on appearances, the glimmering buildings, the bustling streets, but rather on the possibilities they represented. "It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff," she admitted after a long pause. "Terrifying but also exhilarating. Like maybe, just maybe, I could fly instead of fall." Her metaphor struck a chord within me. That feeling of teetering on the brink of transformation was all too familiar. "You will," I assured her. "And when you stumble, and you will, it won't mean failure. It'll mean growth. Every setback is just another lesson, another chance to recalibrate and move forward." A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Funny, isn't it? All these years, I thought I was the wise older sister, doling out advice. Turns out, I'm the one who needed guidance." She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "I guess humility is the first step, huh?" "It's a big one," I agreed, returning her smile. "And honestly, I think you're more ready for this than you realize. You've spent your life navigating relationships, organizing events, connecting people. Those aren't trivial skills, they're powerful tools. Now, it's about using them intentionally, with purpose." For the first time in years, I saw Claire relax into herself, shedding the armor of perfectionism she'd worn for so long. Her shoulders dropped, her posture softened, and her eyes regained their natural warmth. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for showing me what's possible, but for being patient with me. For letting me see this without rubbing it in my face." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. We're sisters. That means we lift each other up, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The rest of the afternoon unfolded in an unexpected harmony. Claire stayed with me as I wrapped up meetings and reviewed project updates, peppering me with questions about leadership, innovation, and the challenges of running a company. Her curiosity was infectious, reminding me of the early days of my own journey when everything felt new and full of promise. By the time evening fell, we left the office together, walking side by side through the city streets.